In this movie, I cover the final method of CSS placement, using imported styles. The imported styles method also uses external style sheets like the link method. However, what differs is the way that we establish the relationship between our HTML document and the CSS file. Instead of using the link tag, we use the import command. To use the import command, we will also have to establish a style section in the head of our document. This method also requires that we place the import command at the top of the style section. So this is the import command. We have @import and then URL, and then inside of the parentheses we will have the actual URL location of our external style sheet. So our import method will allow us to import style sheets into HTML documents by way of the style tags, but it also allows us to do something that's a little bit strange but very interesting and pretty handy once you're familiar with how CSS works. And that is importing style sheets into other style sheets. So as you can imagine, daisy chaining your style sheets this way can have some pretty interesting effects. So the question becomes, when do you want to use your imported styles? Well, you want to use these for whenever style information can be reused, because you're going to be using an external style sheet, but you also want to use this when you want modular control for each page of a website. Now, by far, the imported styles is probably the most peculiar method because there's so much variety in how you can import. By utilizing this method in conjunction with linked style sheets, we can reuse styles and specify different sheets to control specific aspects of a website's appearance and import those aspects into one linked sheet. So then we can quickly and easily swap out or change the exact style that we want to without having to wade through hundreds of lines of code to find that one rule that we want to change. We can also define the appearance of individual pages without affecting all the pages by building these modular sheets and putting them together in the specific documents that we want to affect. Now, just starting out, all of that might sound pretty confusing, and I'll admit that it is somewhat confusing. But let's go ahead here and let's take a look at our sandbox to see how this works in action so that you can kind of grasp what's going on. Now, after you're a little bit more familiar with CSS, I do recommend that you come back and you visit the idea of imported styles, because it allows you to separate out your styles for easy maintenance. So let's go ahead and jump over to our sandbox. And right now we have our style information inside of our main.css. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another external file for our color information. So I'll go ahead and open up my notepad again here, and I'm going to grab the color section here. So go ahead and cut that and paste it over here, and then I'll save this new sheet into the same directory that I've been saving all my other stuff, and I'll just call this color.css. So not only do I have my color information here for the body and the paragraph, but I will also put any other style in here that has to do with our colors. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. I don't need my comments in here anymore because everything inside of my style sheet here will be dealing with color. So I'll go ahead and save that. And then I'll jump over here into the main.css and I'll do import URL color.css. So I'll save that as well. I'll jump over into the browser and I'll refresh there. So I refresh and I see that it looks like something's broken. So I need to track down what has gone wrong. So let's go ahead and jump back here to our main.css. And at the end of this import statement, we do need to have a semicolon in there. And of course, that's one of the great things about any type of hand editing and hand coding. You're always going to forget something. No matter how many times you've done something, you will forget it. So just go ahead and keep in mind that whenever you're doing your hand coding, that you can limit how many bugs you're going to have to troubleshoot by looking at that line of code that you just wrote, just briefly, to see if everything's in place. And so by adding in that semicolon and saving the document, I'll jump back over into my browser and refresh, and we'll see that it's now working. And so to see how this import really works, let's say we want to change the color here for our paragraphs. So I'll jump over to my color.css and I'll change the color of the paragraph to be red. So I'll save that and then jump back to my browser and then refresh, and it's changed. Now overall, imported style sheets present a more modular approach to CSS. Some people may find this modular approach a bit too modular because it really breaks everything down. Because what we would need to do is we would need to set up an external style sheet for each one of these different categories, typography, box model, layout, etc., that we use in our design, and then create external style sheets and then import those in. So that is going to end up meaning that color information that would be applied to an element will reside in one style sheet, while layout information about that same element will reside in another style sheet. So that would be a little complicated for us to keep track of unless we're really familiar with how CSS works. So for our sandbox, it makes sense for us to keep it simple. So we will actually be using embedded style sheets for the rest of this course in regards to our sandbox. For the course, we will be using a single external style sheet, which we will later turn into multiple style sheets. So in essence, we are not starting with a modular approach because a modular approach may not make a lot of sense if you are not familiar with CSS. In the end, just use what makes sense to you or whatever it is that makes sense for your team to use. With that bit of advice, this movie on imported style sheets concludes, and with it, so does the overview of CSS placement.